So why not play to your strength? Why do you want to play someone else's game that you're not good at? You don't have success in it. You don't really know what you're doing, and they really like what they're doing, and they're really good at it doing it, and now you're competing with them. Why? You're starting off at a big disadvantage. At some point, you don't know anything about anything, so you got to learn something, right? But I got to tell you, when you use the concept of rational targeting, what you like, what you're good at, and what you're passionate about, then you're going to have exponential success because you're in your zone, and you would do it because you like to do it, and then you tend to do well with it because it's not even like work. It's just like what you do. And I think that makes things more enjoyable, and I think ultimately you probably have a little bit more success with it.
Let's discover what people are building in the greater Cleveland community. We are telling the stories of Northeast Ohio's entrepreneurs, builders, and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and my returning guest today is Umberto Fedeli. I first had the opportunity to speak with Umberto on this podcast just over a year ago. At the time, our conversation extended far beyond what we were able to include in the original episode, exploring his Italian heritage and Cleveland upbringing, evolution of his career, life philosophies, and approach to business as both an investor and entrepreneur as the founder of one of the largest risk management and insurance firms in Ohio. To set the right context for today's conversation, I'd encourage you to listen to Umberto break down his perspective on Lay of the Land's 135th episode. You can find a link in the show notes. In our conversation today, we pick up where we left off and continue to unpack Umberto's abundance of earned learnings and insights over his career and his life, spanning themes from investing, commitment to lifelong learning, happiness, fulfillment and significance, money and motivation, purpose and meaning, giving back, and a whole lot more. So without further ado, please enjoy this great conversation with Umberto Fedeli after a brief message from our sponsor. Lay of the Land is brought to you by John Carroll University's Boler College of Business, widely recognized as one of the top business schools in the region. As we've heard time and time again from entrepreneurs here on Lay of the Land, many of whom are proud alumni of John Carroll University, success in this ever-changing world of business requires a dynamic and innovative mindset, deep understanding of emerging technologies and systems, strong ethics, leadership prowess, acute business acumen, all qualities nurtured through the Boler College of Business. With 4 different MBA programs of study spanning professional, online, hybrid, and 1-year flexible, the Boler College of Business provides flexible timelines and various class structures for each MBA track, including online, in-person, hybrid, and asynchronous, all to offer the most effective options for you, including the ability to participate in an elective international study tour, providing unparalleled opportunities to expand your global business knowledge by networking with local companies overseas and experiencing a new culture. The career impact of a Boler MBA is formative and will help prepare you for this future of business and get more out of your career. To learn more about John Carroll University's Boler MBA programs, please go to business.jcu.edu. The Boler College of Business is fully accredited by AACSB International, the highest accreditation a college of business can have. So I'm thrilled to be able to do this again. When I revisit our last conversation and think about how much it did resonate with folks, and I was trying to think, why that might be the case, and I came to maybe the clarity and simplicity with which you're able to articulate, kind of the principles, your philosophy as they relate to life, to business, to your success writ large. But I remember, walking away with a lot more questions that I wanted to ask you about, even though we kind of covered maybe a representative portion of your life and thoughts. And other topics that I know some of the folks that I had convened with who know you well, Bob Campana, Adam Kaufman, who had suggested some things that I think would be really fun to unpack together. So I'm looking forward to do that today, having, I think, laid the foundation for it.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I appreciate it.
So I was thinking about what the right immediate thread to pull on would be to continue our conversation. And normally I like to avoid timely topics and in favor of, more of the timeless things. But in the time since we spoke, I think someone who we probably both respect and care and learned a great deal from passed away, namely Charlie Munger. And given the direct applicability of his thinking to the kind of work that you do, and I know you and I have even talked about Berkshire and Buffett, and I'm curious just what you have felt the most salient lessons to learn from Charlie are, and how you've channeled them in what you do.
Well, thanks. I think it's a great question. I think, Jeffrey, that Charlie Munger was one of these unique guys who had incredible wisdom. And maybe one of the definitions I like of wisdom, there's many, the ability to recognize patterns. And I think that Charlie would talk about the ability to have a lattice of mental models and the ability to take all life experiences, that when he looked at investments, but experiences beyond just financials, because investments are basically business, and the other part are human nature. And I think the more complicated part is the human nature part. It's the art side and the science side. And so Charlie Munger had this unique ability to really understand, like Warren Buffett, human nature. And I think that the lattice mental models was something that stuck out. And also he was very big on inversion. So anytime we look at something and we look at why we want to do something or why we should do something in business or in life or in investments, there's a lot of correlations between the three. It's also a good process to invert and be that devil's advocate or look at all the reasons you don't want to. So the antithesis of something sometimes is a good process. The other thing I think, besides lattice of mental models and the inversion, Charlie Munger had this ability to be so intellectually honest. And as Peter Drucker once said, most people in life see things for the way they want to see them, not for the way they really are.
Yep.
And Charlie Munger had that ability to look at things the way they really are. And also he had a sense of integrity in everything. Now, he could be a little bit sarcastic. He could be a little bit...
He's known for some quips.
So, yes, he'd be a little, maybe he's not as diplomatic as his good friend in Warren Buffett, but he lived a tough life when you think about, he lost a child very young.
Yeah.
He was divorced. He lost his eye. There was a period of time that he was on the streets crying after losing a child. And he said he just had to learn to muddle through things in life because things are going to happen to you. And he lived to just about, 100. So he's a very wise guy. I don't mean a wise guy, but a very guy full of wisdom.
Truly wise.
But I think the lattice, the inversion, the intellectual honesty, and I think also he made it very clear that it's a few good decisions. That's a Pareto's Law, which we wrote an article about, and it works almost in every aspect of life. It's a few important decisions that really have the most impact on your life, on your investments, on your career. And sometimes we think there's so many, and he was very big on focusing on fewer, not more. So I think that's the takeaway. The Charlie book, the almanac, Bobby Campana had sent that to me as a gift. I've listened to, I think, about every one over decades of his talks or of his speeches. And so, again, he and Warren are not life heroes for me. There's a separation. They're kind of business or investment heroes. Yep. There are other people that may be more of a hero, maybe a school teacher or a nurse or a Mother Teresa or somebody like that. But when it comes to business and investments, tremendous wisdom.
I had a feeling you would have that kind of informed opinion about him. So I think he's taught me a lot as well. So if there was a pattern or a theme to our last conversation, think, and probably this is because it's true for you, but it was about the who. And we talked a lot about that as a principal decision in contemplating the kinds of impact that can have for the work that you do across everything, who you marry, who you do business with, who you admire. All this has a great deal of influence. One thing that we didn't get to talk about last time that I wanted to learn from you about how you think about it is the way you apply that thinking towards your own business, who you work with. And particularly when you think about who, works here with you at the Fedeli Group, the kinds of qualities and characteristics of the people that you have found over the long run lead to the best kind of relationships that you admire. And perhaps with that, some of the characteristics or qualities that you have learned since maybe don't have the weight and importance that perhaps you thought they did when you were making those decisions?
Well, I think it's a good point. And to me, just like an investment, that 80% of your success is asset allocation.
Yeah.
And in life, it's also allocation, but not assets. We'll just take a couple letters off of that. And so if the who isn't right, the what usually doesn't matter. And before you figure out in life what you want to do, you sometimes need to figure out, who you want to be, right? And so we have a simple philosophy that we want to have people what we call, have, or possess the 3 I's. One and foremost is integrity. Without integrity, a lot more doesn't matter. It may be the most important thing.
Yeah.
Sound like Howard Marks in his book, The Most Important Thing, where he had 20 or 30 chapters, and should have been called The Most Important Things.
Right.
But integrity is of the utmost important. Then you need to have intensity, and I define that as the ability to bring something to a conclusion, get something done, get results, because you can go through the motions, but if you don't get the results and you go through the process and you don't end up getting the results of what you're trying to accomplish, then sometimes you're just running in circles. And then the other is intelligence. But what I mean by intelligence, it's much broader than intellectual intelligence. It could be emotional intelligence. It could be street smarts. It could be experience. So to me, it starts off with the 3 I's, and then we shift over to what I call the 3 C's. You have 3 commitments we ask for, and one of them is, are you committed to lifelong learning? Are you committed to learning your industry, your business, your profession, your country, your community? Basically, do you have that intellectual curiosity where you're always trying to learn?
Yep.
So we want people that are committed to life learning in many aspects of life. And then we want to know, are you cooperative, collegial, congenial, and collaborative with your colleagues? Because you can be really nice with a customer or very nice on the outside, but are you also that way on the inside? Because then it's hard to work with somebody that doesn't have that. And so once you talk about the commitments of lifelong learning, the other thing is, are you proactive and not reactive? Because you can avoid so many problems in life if you're proactive and take an approach and try to anticipate. It's never going to be perfect. But if you anticipate what a client would want, if you anticipate something that perhaps you should be doing, think ahead. You look at some great athletes, they have that ability to visualize catching that ball or hitting that ball or whatever they're doing. And so to me, it's the 3 commitments and the 3 I's. I once wrote a piece about the 6 E's, but also you have to encounter someone and you have to encourage them. And then you got to empathize with them, right?
Yeah.
But then you also have to energize.
It's powerful alliteration here.
Yeah, and so that's how I remember things and try to simplify them in my mind. And like I said, the ability to recognize patterns. But integrity is important. Obviously, work ethic's important, and interpersonal skills. If you have the ability to learn, then you can learn new things. But if you're not committed to lifelong learning, and unfortunately, sometimes people 30 or 40 years later are just doing the same thing the same way, and they really haven't progressed, and they really don't have an interest in progressing, right? They just can't wait to leave and go do what else they do. So to me, those are the important things.
How do you gauge those within people?
Well, it's not always so easy because, when you interview people, and I don't think I'm the best at it because I tend to like most people, some people can interview very well and then their performance isn't there, and other people maybe are not as skillful in interviewing, but they're really incredible in the results. I find the best way to really find out about someone is talk to as many people as you know or that you can find that know that person. And so we have a gentleman on the West Coast that we invest with. They'll talk to between 100 and 200 customers before they invest into one software company.
Wow.
Because you start finding a pattern if you just talk to 1 or 2 or 3. So I think for me, the best way is to find out, how they interact. I remember listening to Ken Langone, who is one of the co-founders of Home Depot, a brilliant guy, super successful guy, great human being, a great philanthropist who now is in his late 80s.
Yep.
And he stayed away from one of the worst con men's in the world. And they said, how did you know this guy? You golf with him, and how did you realize? And he said, well, when I golfed with him, he was really nice to me, and he could not have been sweeter, and we had lunch. But when I saw him interacting with the caddy, he was nasty, and how he interacted with the person who parked his car. And then I saw how he interacted with the waitress, right? He said, that was a turnoff to me, that he treated me nice because I was a rich billionaire, but he didn't treat others really nice. And so I think how people treat people, how do they treat their mothers, their fathers, their brothers or sisters? No, we can tease each other, right, and joke around, and it's not a perfect world. But I think people tend to be relatively consistent, and you want people who are kind and compassionate. Empathy is so important to me. Commitment, character. I wrote a piece once about how I see with 5 or 6 C's. Leaders, great leaders, okay, good communicators, right, and compassionate, and men of commitment or women of commitment. So I think to me, it's talking to a number of people. I also have learned probably the hard way to get other people involved in the process.
Yeah.
So instead of you trying to do everything yourself, have your teammates, have your associates also being involved in that interviewing process. Feel part of it. They may see something that others don't see. And I happen to think, and this might sound a little sexist, but I think sometimes ladies are a little smarter. They see things that men don't always see. They see through things. They're not as easily fooled. They have better senses of situations. So I think diversity is a good thing. Diversity in age, diversity in experiences, diversity male, female, younger, older, education. I think diversity is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah. So you have this love of learning, and evidently a commitment to lifelong learning and a value of it in others. I'm curious how you continue to cultivate it within yourself, and why shouldn't we just be satisfied with what we know?
Well, there's so much to learn. I mean, it's almost insatiable to me because I don't care if it's investments, for instance, or if it's about health,
yeah,
or if it's about history. I mean, to me, there's just so much to learn about people, about life. To me, it's something, if I had done this in college, I would have been number one in my class, right? But yeah, I was working so much that I wasn't studying as much. But this whole idea of lifelong learning, again, it's easier what I explain if you do what I refer to as rational targeting. If you do what you're good at, what you like, and what you're interested in, and you're passionate about, because then you have an interest. I find it harder for me to be committed to lifelong learning in areas that I'm not very interested or passionate about.
Right.
So then you might have to do it to get through something, but then it's a little harder for me. So there's certain topics that I just don't have a lot of interest in. Not that they're bad. There's certain sports I just don't have a passion for. There's certain things, maybe in the science area. But I think the rational targeting, when you're passionate about something and you're good at it and you've had experiences with it, and then you do something called relationship mapping, where you then take contacts you have and say, okay, how do you now execute? And going from what I refer to as connecting dots or collecting dots to connecting dots, because you can collect dots, but if you never execute anything, then you leave so much success on the table, and 1 or 2 more steps could provide exponential success.
Yeah. With the overwhelming amount of things you could learn about, how do you try to balance, the tried and true wisdom that's stood the test of time versus what is trending today, but there is some signal in that noise? How do you try and weigh, where to focus your own curiosity?
For full disclosure and to be totally transparent, by nature, I am not balanced. I'm not a balanced person, so I have to work at balance because I'm not. I think anything that is more futuristic could be fascinating, could be interesting, but it's just an educated guess. And if you really think how inaccurate most predictions are, and Howard Marks, who is a brilliant guy, and he gives great talks, and I read his memos, but I actually like watching his interviews better than his memos. He'll say, we know where we've been because we've been there. We know where we're at because we're there. We really have no idea where we're going.
Yeah.
And if it's politics or if it's predicting interest rates or things that happen in the world, so much of life is much more random than we'd like to think. So you can study where we're at in history and have pretty good results because it happened. So, for instance, if you talk about, let's say, AI, and you start predicting all the things that can potentially happen, it's fascinating. I don't know what it does or doesn't happen. We think we can predict the future. I think it's pretty hard. We don't really know if something is a trend or is it just a fad. I'll show you pictures of leisure suits back in the 70s. They haven't come back yet. Maybe they will someday. That may have been a fad. But I remember walking into Lululemon for the first time with my son-in-law, Luke, and my other son, Luke, and we were in Naples. And I said, now, is this going to be a trend or is this a fad? And I couldn't necessarily tell at the time. But, bell bottoms,
right.
Or longer hair, shorter hair, wide lapels. I remember when I was younger, I worked with a great guy named Harvey Lewis, and his father was from Russia, Simon. And I said, Mr. Lewis, your dad is always dressed so dapper. He has suits and his ties. And he said, those are so old that they've come back in style. So I thought he was fashionable. It's just if you wait long enough, the wide lapel, the pleats, the no pleats, the cuffs, the no cuffs. So sometimes things are cycles and they come back.
Right.
There's other times where it's a fad. So when we start looking at predicting the future, I had a 5-year period where I thought maybe we could do that. And we were looking at these companies that we were saying, these are disruptors. They're going to change how things are done. And for 5 years, it worked until it didn't work.
Right.
And I got to tell you something. I went back now, and what I call disruptors now, I said, now we call them speculative growth. Because trying to predict these early companies and which ones are going to make it, it's fascinating, but it is so hard. And I finally realized that I'm not that good at it. I thought I was because it worked for 5 years, and we had enormous success. We had made a little investment in a company that went up 18-fold. And then we had another one that worked. And then all of a sudden, we were investing in companies right before or right after, let's say, COVID.
Right.
And it worked. And we really thought we were really smart. Well, DocuSign worked because people weren't going out and getting signatures, and Pinterest people were looking at that, and Teladoc and telemedicine because people weren't visiting. And a lot of these things, our timing was either lucky or maybe we were intuitive, but they got so overvalued that we didn't really pay attention to how overvalued. I trying to figure out what the P ratio was, but they didn't have E. Then it said price to cash flow, and I couldn't figure that out. And then I had some young guys say, well, I don't think you understand. These are really trade on price to sales. And I said, well, how do you rationalize that? How could you ever finance it? How do the numbers work? And I said, it didn't make sense, but the whole world didn't seem to make sense. And then it didn't make sense anymore. So now back as an investor and back to what we have figured out that we have consistently done well, and that is finding a company that's already proven. They're already the leader. They're already a wide moat. They're already successful. They already have a durable, sustainable competitive advantage, and they're out of favor at an attractive valuation. They're already proven. I'm not predicting anything. They've already done the hard part, and I just get in when I think it's attractive, and if it becomes more attractive, I add, and then I don't have to figure out if they're going to make it or not because they already did. If you think about Warren Buffett, he didn't buy Apple up until several years back, right? He could have made way more money if he had predicted Apple earlier or Netflix earlier or Amazon earlier. Now, I admire guys that are in venture, right? It's fascinating to me, but I got to tell you something. Sometimes I think it's more gambling, and you're going to have a lot of losers, and just hope that a couple of those winners will more than make that up. I have finally admitted that I don't think I'm that good at that because they all sound like good ideas.
Right.
And most of them don't work.
Right.
And it's very hard to figure out which ones are. I remember a friend of mine looked at Amazon when it first came out, and he said, they're just selling books. He didn't think there was anything that special. Their website didn't look that great. And so it's not that simple, right? And so it's harder. So to me, anything that's futuristic is fascinating, but will it ever even work? I remember years ago they said, you're going to be able to just talk into things and they'll do this and you won't have to be able to do this. And the technology still isn't good.
Yeah,
I have to be careful. I don't even use my iPhone and talk in it too often because I've been embarrassed with some things that come out the other side if I don't proof it, right? Some of these things never happen or they don't happen as well as people think.
Right. Well, I think it layers back in that notion you had mentioned earlier of the way that you want to perceive the world versus the way maybe that it actually is.
And, being intellectual honest is hard.
Yeah.
And people say, he calls it the way it is. I said, no, he calls it the way he thinks it is. The way it really is and the way you think it is isn't always the way it really is. And so having that ability to be so intellectually honest and say, you know what, I really messed up. Even Cialdini wrote a book called Influence, and the ability to acknowledge your mistakes and acknowledge your faults. What actually happens if you have that ability to do that is people actually trust you more and they like you more because you show some vulnerability. And most people want to talk about their winners and not their losers. And very few people can admit their mistakes. And I never had a problem admitting my mistakes. I made so many of them that I had no problem admitting them because I said, I'm not very good at doing much. And the people around me already knew that anyway. So what was I admitting? Admitting something they already knew? The cover-up is always worse if you think about it. If you screw up and you made a mistake and you said, Jeffrey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake and here's what I did and I apologize for it. Sometimes people start feeling bad that you're tougher on yourself than they would have been on you.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I want to just introduce kind of an orthogonal topic here, if you're open to it. So, through the podcast, I get to learn from a lot of founders about their motivations, their inspirations, kind of what is driving them. And there's this overwhelming pattern of purpose, autonomy, captaining their own ship, cultivating the kind of culture that they wish they had worked in when they were working somewhere else. But I think there is a latent one, which is financial independence in its nature, and particularly from those who had not had it in their upbringing. And so I do want to talk about money for a moment. And I think, from the other side of financial independence, I'd love to hear from you how you have thought about money as a motivation and how your thinking on it has changed over the time that you have achieved the success that you have.
Well, you have some experiences. So, growing up, being born in the inner city in a rented double and then moving to a middle-class neighborhood as a baby, having a father that was hardworking, fifth grade, three of my grandparents, third grade, one didn't go to school. So nobody in my family had gone to junior high, let alone high school or college. So I'm a peasant kid. When you couldn't afford something, you actually wanted more. I remember one time I left my bike in front of my dad's garage, and it was a detached garage, and he had a dump truck. And he had worked 110, 120 hours that week, and he gave me one warning: don't ever leave your bike there. And I did it several weeks later, and I couldn't find my bike, and it was gone.
Oh, no.
And I said, Dad, when can I have my bike back? He said, when you buy your own bike. And I couldn't afford to buy a bike, and I didn't have any money, and I had to wait till I could work. So the ability to buy that bike and the ability to buy gifts for somebody. I remember being in school, and I went shopping during the holidays for some presents. And when I went to the register, I didn't have anywhere near enough money, and it wasn't a lot. And that feeling of going back and putting everything on the shelf because I couldn't afford to buy something for somebody else, I didn't like that feeling. I remember the first time going on a trip and staying at the lesser facilities. And when someone tells you, yes, the restroom's down the hall. And then, of course, I was a little heavier. I was 330, 340 pounds. And you went lay on the bed, and the bed hit the bottom of the floor. And then you walked into some beautiful resort with the flowers and the trees and the beautiful lobbies. To say that because you couldn't afford things, you wanted them more. Or we would drink these off-brand sodas. I won't mention some of the names, and they just didn't taste as good, or these off-brand products that were like not quite as good as the others were. So I think what happens is that there's no question that people want to achieve some financial success and the ability to have the independence, the ability to buy nicer clothes or nicer car or nicer gifts, or to be more generous to others. I think financial means gives you more independence. It gives you more options. It gives you the ability to do more for others. It gives you the ability to have more comfort. It gives you the ability to live maybe perhaps more enjoyable life. Not as much as people think, by the way, when I've done the research on the happiness thing. But financial success, initially I just wanted to be independent and do my own thing because I didn't fit the world, and I wanted to beat to my own drum. So it started off with I want to be independent. Yeah. Because I just want to do my own thing because I just didn't want to be part of the corporate world, part of the establishment. I just didn't seem to fit. And then and I didn't want to fit. And then it was, then you want to make a good living. And then it's all right, well, if I just get that top 10%, and that was okay, then you say, well, that's good, but boy, if you get me in that top 1%, I mean, that's really okay. And then you say, well, that's okay, but boy, if you could get to that top 1/10 of 1%, and so you keep on raising the bar. Unfortunately, with any level of success or power or anything that is material, there actually is no number. it's insatiable, and at some point it's really diminishing. But you don't think that. You always think the next level and the next level and the next level. But there's no question that when you have the ability to do more for others, be it philanthropy, be it for family members, the better grade of ice cream. You know what I'm saying? The other day I tasted some Haagen-Dazs butter pecan or pralines and cream and Haagen-Dazs rum and raisin, and I had forgot because I'm lactose intolerant. I said, "Wow, that's pretty good ice cream,
pretty
right?"
good. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And so of course I even like bad ice cream. So to me, there's two flavors, good and better, right? And same with cake. I said if that's bad cake, I'll like it, and if it's really good cake, I'll even like it more. and so I think yes, to say that most people that have had some degree of success in life didn't want to be more successful financially, I think for the most part that's not the case. I think it is. But also purpose becomes, as you go up that hierarchy, if you will, purpose becomes more important, because if it's just about financial success and there's not a purpose behind it, and even the research that Arthur Brooks has done at the Harvard Business School about the whole topic of happiness and what can money buy you relative to happiness, right? And there are things that money can buy relative to happiness, and there are three major areas, and one of them are experiences. But experiences without people and memories aren't the same. Philanthropy or doing good things for other people doesn't necessarily be big, but be able to do other things, and then also time. So if you don't like cutting the grass, and you can hire someone to cut the grass, or if you don't like driving, or if you can fly private so you don't have to wait around in airports and get delayed as much. So those are the three major areas that money can buy relative to happiness.
Right.
But money in itself and happiness, people will typically, if they're just chasing financial success or power, what St. Thomas Aquinas said, to be careful of the vicious four versus to embrace the virtuous four, which are faith, family, friends, and work. But work had to have a service to others, and earn success.
Lay of the Land is brought to you by Impact Architects and by 90. As we share the stories of entrepreneurs building incredible organizations in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio, Impact Architects has helped hundreds of those leaders, many of whom we have heard from as guests on this very podcast, realize their own visions and build these great organizations. I believe in Impact Architects and the people behind it so much that I have actually joined them personally in their mission to help leaders gain focus, align together, and thrive by doing what they love. If you too are trying to build great, Impact Architects is offering to sit down with you for a free consultation or provide a free trial through 90, the software platform that helps teams build great companies. If you are interested in learning more about partnering with Impact Architects or by leveraging 90 to power your own business, please go to ia.layoftheland.fm. The link will also be in our show notes. Yeah. Well, I've heard you talk about happiness as love, and the essence of love is in the service of others. I think there's a lot of topics we could go to from here. Maybe we could just go a little deeper on this confluence of happiness and money for a moment. Why is it insatiable in the way that you had mentioned?
Well, if you read some of the great philosophers, Aristotle being one, Plato, Socrates, deep down, most people really do a lot of things in their life because they're really yearning to be happy. So if it's career or if it's marriage or family or many of their decisions, as human beings, we have this desire to figure out how to be happy. It's often a path that isn't the right path, but you don't necessarily know that sometimes for decades or many years, or to achieve various levels and think it's the next level. If you look at some of the greatest movie stars, performers, singers, famous people who had very unfortunate lives, and you say they were on top of their game. They were number one. They were like the best, and they are not around anymore. Or they had very sad endings. And I also had experiences meeting a lot of people that I saw that they thought they were after what they thought would make them happy until they were at the end. And I did have the opportunity of being with people, literally on their deathbeds, and then how remorseful they were doing the things they thought or seeing things that didn't work out. And I think ultimately, if you had to pick just one word, just one. Love is the most important word. So if you read the New Testament and got nothing else out of the New Testament, and you say, it's about love, because love is the most powerful emotion. And we also yearn for love. If a baby doesn't have love, the baby dies. So this is not just a philosophy. They literally die without love. So love is the most important thing. But love usually happens when you are doing something for someone else. That caring that a parent does, the mother of a child, a grandparent, someone who loves their country or loves their friend, having that purpose of putting somebody above themselves so it doesn't become selfish. So I think it's ultimately about love. I think in Arthur Brooks's research, the virtuous four that St. Thomas Aquinas talked about, but also they were given to us at the Beatitudes 2,000 years ago. And I couldn't even figure out what they really meant. The Beatitudes is a Greek word for blessed or happiness. And so the first one was poor of spirit. Well, people who have a sense of humility and put other people's needs above them tend to be happier. And then, the second one was blessed of sorrowful. People that can admit their faults or mistakes tend to be happier people. I'm talking about like Charlie Munger, right? He admitted his faults and his mistakes. And so the virtues were faith, and it isn't so important. Faith is very important, but on the research, it wasn't a particular religion, a particular church, a particular temple. It was the fact that the sense of humility to say there's somebody more powerful than me. Because Charlie Munger likes to look at inversion, and C.S. Lewis said the biggest sin of man is a sin of pride. So if you invert pride, you come up with humility. And so if you have some sense of humility, but saying thank you shows a sense of humility. Saying please, saying sorry. I mean, we don't have to have these big things to show a sense of humility. Give somebody something to drink. But that doesn't mean you can't have financial success. The ability in this great country that we live in is you can have your cake and eat it too. And I used to say, what good is a cake if you can't eat it? So what is wrong if you have more financial success? You can do more good for your family, more good for your friends, more good for society. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Success is not a bad thing. And even Scripture would say it's the love of money that's the root of all evil. The love of power, when you put the power and the money above relationships or above people. That Harvard study that followed people around for 85 years, 8,500 people, okay? I summarized that whole study in one word. The people that had the most fulfilling lives had the best relationships. That was the one word. It was relationships. Even Buffett quoted something about love, and he's not known as, a guy that talks about love. He's, one of the greatest investors in the history, and he's a business guy. But here, he's not talking about the wealthiest person in the world. He's talking about the people you loved you. So it comes back to that. But why can't you do both? What's wrong with financial success? To me, having people that feel guilty of being successful, I don't think anybody should be guilty. I think capitalism is a good thing. Now, understand, by the nature of capitalism, sometimes it is zero-sum games. So sometimes somebody wins and somebody loses. It's not always win-win, unfortunately, in capitalism. And sometimes in capitalism, it's not perfect.
Yeah.
But it sure beats communism, and it sure beats socialism. And we don't have a perfect society, and we don't have a perfect world. But America is a lot better place than most countries in the world that have socialism or communism. They're trying to get into our country, right? You don't see too many Americans trying to go out somewhere else. So we do have a lot of problems in our country. We have a lot of challenges in our country. But I think success can be a good thing if you use your success to do good.
Yeah.
If you use your success to help others, if you use your success to take care of your family, it's okay to help your family out. If you're not going to take care of your kids, who's going to take care of your kids or your grandkids? It's okay. Now, you want to teach them discipline and love, and you have to say no sometimes. You can't say yes all the time, right? And you got to let them work so they understand what it takes. And sometimes they have to understand there's rejections and there's also consequences. And I had to learn that either you who love your children, discipline them, or somebody in the world that doesn't love them will.
Yeah.
And once you realize that if you love them, you discipline them because you love them, you will never hurt them if you discipline them as long as there's love. But boy, I tell you what, a lack of discipline causes a lot of problem because there's consequences in the real world with inappropriate behavior.
I definitely want to come back to the philanthropic thread, but what I want to ask first is, how would you think about trying to gauge whether you are playing the right game, even like in service of avoiding the later in life regrets that unfortunately, people that you've known, I'm sure everyone has known, have about maybe they weren't even playing the right game?
Well, I think if you look at purpose, you brought up the word, Jeffrey, purpose before. If you have a purpose and your purpose is to touch lives, to have impact, to be of service to others, then it's more meaningful. Now, unfortunately, certain things in life don't seem to have that much purpose, because if you're selling a product or a particular service, it may not look like it's not that important to humanity, right? And we can give you plenty of examples, but it's also how you interact with people. And Mother Teresa, she's got so many incredible quotes, right? But you can do ordinary things in an extraordinary way multiple times every day. So how do you interact with that valet guy or the waiter or the waitress? Or, how you treat somebody in an elevator, or that person that you meet that's the receptionist, or a person that is just starting off their career. And so I think you can touch lives and have impact and have meaning and purpose by how you do things and who you do them with in almost any aspect of life. And if it's just about financial success, you get into what my friend Father Spitzer would talk about, and he calls it level 2 comparison game. He goes into the 4 levels of happiness, and level 1 happiness would be drinking something, eating something. Level 2 is ego, power, control. The problem there is he'll tell you it's a road to hell because it's insatiable at any level. But if you aim at level 3, the Jesuits would say, men and women for others, success to significance, are you making a difference? That becomes more purposeful. And even in the book, Man's Search for Meaning, the people at Auschwitz who were only worried about their own survival, those that happened to be fortunate to survive didn't do as well as those that really were helping other people. So what happens is the people that were living in level 3 and the people that put other people's interests and had the sense of humility that the Beatitudes talk about, or St. Thomas Aquinas talked about, or Arthur Brooks's research at the Harvard Business School talks about, actually live longer, we're happier, and we're more successful. So it's actually a good thing, not a bad thing. It's good. And business is good. It's neutral. Now, it could be bad if how you do business, how you interact with people, right? So I think business success is a good thing. And I think financial independence is okay too, right? I think sometimes people feel guilty when they've been blessed with success. Now, sometimes people are just fortunate. You look at the right time, the right place, and, the right era. I don't know if Bill Gates could start another Microsoft again today, or if Jeff Bezos could start up another Amazon today. So sometimes it's the timing and the place. Sometimes someone makes an investment. You look at some of the people that were in Omaha, Nebraska, the person who just gave $1 billion so people can have their tuitions paid. Her husband was an early investor of Warren Buffett and happened to meet him and happened to invest and happened to do so well. So I don't know if that was all strategic. Sometimes being at the right place at the right time.
It's a lot of luck.
There is a lot of randomness in life, or just about how you meet your potential wife. You didn't go to one place, you may have not met that person. You didn't work at that one place. You didn't go to school at that one place. You didn't have someone introduce you to somebody. And it's just, sometimes life is random. Now, I don't know if it's in God's plan or not. I'm not sure how that all works. I can't say that I understand everything because I don't. I forgot what your question was now.
Whether or not we're playing the right game. But I want to ask you, we can maybe layer in philanthropy too, because with the intentionality that you've approached investing and thinking about, return on investment and kind of the fundamentals of business, I'm curious if that kind of thinking at all permeates into how you think about philanthropy and the returns on giving and weighing, you mentioned kind of the working on balance, but how do you weigh making a big impact for a few number of people versus kind of a ubiquitous problem that could have a lot more reach? What drives you in your philanthropic giving?
Well, it's a good question, and it's something that is important to me. It's about first of all, you have to have a passion and an interest. So for instance, there are certain things I'm just not passionate about. It doesn't mean they're not good, but if I have the choice of doing something that is artsy, ballet is beautiful, or opera is nice, right?
Yeah.
Or helping a child that may not live, or that's sick, or a parent that could lose a child. To me, it's an easy decision between those. So I happen to be more passionate about children causes, but also I am passionate about those that are elderly and maybe have been forgotten because they're now on the other part of life, and they're more vulnerable. So to me, it's about, am I making a difference? Am I having impact? to get involved with something where you don't move the dial. That doesn't mean you can't get involved with something that's big if you can still have impact, but also, are you going the right way? To kind of answer your question before, I think we all have to do some reflection and saying, all right, is this the right thing? If you're married someday, you'll find that your wife will kind of give you her opinion. They're not as impressed with you as you may think. And so sometimes you're getting the input of a wife or your children or your real friends or some real advisors who have your best interests at heart, getting feedback from them. And sometimes it's hard to take because they may say, your temper's a little bit out of control or your ego's a little out of control or, boy, you're a little full of yourself here, Jeffrey, or you're a little... So sometimes you need someone to say that. Arthur Brooks likes to say you need some useless friends. And I know that sounds terrible, but what he means by that is what he refers to as real friends, not deal friends. And what often happens in life and business, you tend to become friendly with people you're working with or people you're doing business with. That's not a bad thing, by the way. It's going to be a very good thing. Yep. But also you need some people who are just going to be your friends and you're going to be their friends just because you're friends. There's friends for a reason, there's friends for a season, and sometimes there's friends for life. And as we go through progression, to me, it's about having impact. Are you making a difference? And are you passionate about it? If it's an area you're not interested in. So if you don't like ballet and you say, I don't see how that does good. And you say, well, it's beautiful. And some people might not like art and say, I don't know how this helps society get this artwork. It's beautiful. Or then what's beautiful? I mean, I look at some art and I don't understand it. And people look at it and they say, well, that's beautiful. I don't understand it. And I think it's nice. Don't get me wrong, it's not like harming anybody. Yeah. But again, if you got an elderly person and they're being treated with some compassion at the end of their life, or a sick child, or a child that maybe, or a person whose life, so healthcare to me makes a big difference, because I don't know anybody who doesn't run into healthcare problems with their friends, their family, their parents, their grandparents, themselves. Ultimately, it affects 100%. It's not like a little issue. And a lot of healthcare was originally started as a mission, right? To do good and take care of others, that are sick or suffering. And so it's hard for me to watch someone that suffers, someone that loses a loved one. And so those areas for me are more interesting because you're making a difference in someone's life, right? But sometimes it's hard to say, is it really a charity or is this more of a community thing?
What's your perspective on, and I don't know if these are the only two approaches, but I recently read Rockefeller's biography. I've admired him very much as a Cleveland entrepreneur. And one thing I did not know about him until I went through it was the degree to which he was giving since he was in his teens. It wasn't just after he had created the wealth that he did that he gave, he was giving his entire life. And I think that's maybe in contrast to someone like a Buffett who's thinking more, I can, in my afterlife, contribute a lot more by having built, this wealth that can be, kind of allocated to good stewards who have the interest and passion to take on these problems.
Well, I didn't obviously know Rockefeller. I'm not that old, and I didn't read that much, but I think he was a guy that was kind of faith-filled.
He was.
And so I think that a lot of his philanthropy was something he must have been ingrained with either his family or his upbringing, or earlier than in life where he saw that he can make an impact. So I think in his case, he was probably very much a philanthropist, which means lover of mankind. He had a human side, and he may have looked at having enormous successes by being able to do more good, and that may have been one of his driving forces. I think some people are ingrained with that, where it's cultural. I know that I have certain friends that grew up in a certain culture or certain perhaps religion or a certain upbringing where the whole idea of helping somebody. I've talked to an old Jewish friend of mine. He's gone now, and he grew up poor and his family was poor, but they always put a couple pennies aside to help the poor people. He didn't realize he was one of the poor people, but it was ingrained from his mother and his father and almsgiving. But it was ingrained, even though he was poor and his parents, were very much blue collar. But, he shared with me as a little boy, it was just ingrained to help somebody less fortunate than you. So I think in certain cultures or in certain families, it's kind of ingrained. In others, I think you learn it by seeing the good that others do, and it inspires you. And you also realize that people who are typically very generous and very giving tend to be happier, I seem. Just in my opinion, there's probably some research on that, because they get tremendous joy about the ability to do something for somebody else. They get tremendous joy about giving and helping and doing something. It's just like if you have somebody and you find a present for them, it could be something simple, and they really like it. It brings a tremendous amount of satisfaction that you made them smile and you made them happy. So sometimes you learn it from other people, and because we all learn from others, and you see things. You also learn what you maybe don't like from others as well. But I think you can learn philanthropy through either how your upbringing, or you could see other examples of the impact, like this recent gift this woman had given, which was $1 billion to basically endow, I think it was a medical school, right? And all these people that will have the burden taken away of borrowing money and having debts for years. And people say, wow, that is a wonderful thing that they were able to do, and all the success and all this wealth. But I think that inspires some people. Now, I think also at a certain time, I'm not sure when that happens. It probably doesn't happen when you're younger, and maybe it happens when you're older. I think at some point people realize, like, you don't take anything. Everybody leaves 100%.
Right.
All. It doesn't matter what the dollar amount is, right?
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, they're like, they can do something good for somebody else. And I think that brings tremendous joy. When she asked her husband before he had passed away, he said, do whatever you think you would like to do. And I think that will inspire others to do good and say, boy, what a nice thing. And think about it. If everybody that was super, super successful could endow a nursing home so that all those people in that nursing home could be taken care of. Another person endows a grade school or a high school. Someone else endows a hospital, a school, a college, a hunger center. And you say, well, you not only do good today, you can do good for decades or generations or centuries to come. Now, you got to be careful who's going to manage that, because like, how far out can you go where you can predict like how something like that will happen? The money she is giving to this endowment, it has to be invested prudently and wisely, and so it does what they're trying to do. And that doesn't mean that's going to happen, because you're not going to have much input once it's gone and once you're gone, right? But I think examples, how you're living, and I can't underscore the importance, I think, of faith. When I look at the motto of the state of Ohio, which very few people know of, do you know what it is?
I don't.
Well, God, all things were possible, right? And if you go back to our country earlier in the history of our country, faith in separation wasn't as much. It was kind of ingrained in families. It was more. And I think we've gotten a little bit away from that today. And I don't view that as a positive thing, by the way. I think that most things work better with some sense of faith. One is the sense of humility, to say you're not the most powerful, you're not the center of the universe. Okay, there's somebody more powerful than you. So I think we've gotten a little bit away from that. Not everywhere, but on the other hand, to be a person of faith and not treat people with respect or kindness. And if you don't agree with somebody, that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why you have to find what divides somebody from somebody. Can't we find what binds something? You have a different political view, different view on a way of life, a different view on a perspective. Who to say I'm right and you're wrong? So why can't we be friends and be respectful of your faith? Why do I have to tell you your faith's wrong, my faith is right? I don't understand how anybody can think you can kill somebody in the name of religion and think that's a good thing. I don't get that. I don't think how people think terrorism is a good thing. I don't think how they think murder is a good thing. They're not called the 10 suggestions.
That's right.
There are certain things that are black and white. And, murder and stealing and cheating are wrong. Now, sometimes people don't think what they're doing is wrong. And there are things sometimes in life that are perhaps gray.
Yeah.
Right? But there are certain things that are black and white.
What topic or question do you wish I have asked you?
Well, I mean, the recent article that I wrote that I spent all this enormous time with on the whole topic of happiness, where I've listened to hundreds of podcasts and watched videos, and I was doing what was referred to as me search.
Me search.
I also have learned, because I am by nature not a writer, but if I can write about something, which takes me an enormous amount of time and reflection and a lot of drafts, but if I can write and if I can share, and ultimately if I can teach, then it's a way that I really learn.
Oh, for me as well. It galvanizes your thinking, trying to write.
If you can write, share, and ultimately teach. Because to really teach it, you really have to know the material. You really then learn it. And so I just got almost obsessed with this topic. So, we quoted Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and Warren Buffett and Oprah Winfrey and Arthur Brooks, who wrote this book. And he's a professor of this happiness topic at the Harvard Business School. But even to quote Thomas Aquinas, who is a brilliant theologian, but even St. Augustine, I use one quote from him that I really like, because if you study his history, he did not start off as a saint.
Yeah.
He was quite the ladies' man, I understood. I didn't know him. Obviously, he lived way before my time. But he did say something that I liked, and I used in the article. He said, every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. And so if you think about it, a saint's anybody who ultimately makes it to heaven. So we're all called to become saints, right? But not every person who ends up as a saint started off as a saint. They could have, like to drink too much, eat too much. They like the girls too much. Maybe they weren't as good of a business person or father or so forth. But the fact that a sinner has a future means that everybody can also turn their life around. And if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, they can change that and improve that. So it isn't like, well, I blew it. Okay, you can't change what happened. It's done. Learn, reflect, and then move on.
Yeah.
Ray Dalio says these are little gems when you can have mistakes and plus reflections, right? But then what do you do going forward? So to me, that topic was fascinating, and every sentence was impactful, because I wanted to cram as much as I could in there and share as much as I learned. But I also selfishly was trying to learn it. Now, living it is not as easy, right? Because even saying, if you get rid of all the things that make you unhappy, will you automatically be happy? Not necessarily, because life is going to throw things at us that, unfortunately, no matter what we do, we're all works in progress, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the happiness thing, but I think we addressed that. And in a recent article we wrote, you need to be the CEO of yourself. And you need to find out that, you got to take the lead, and you can use other resources. But if you wait for the government to take care of you, you wait for the lawyer to take care of you, you wait for the doctor to take care of you, you got to take the lead and then leverage those with more experience and knowledge, doctors or attorneys or architects or other people who have other talents and other experiences. But you got to take ownership, and you got to take the lead. And I would not be one to wait for someone else to do it for you.
Yeah, it deeply resonates, and I think certainly plays into entrepreneurship kind of generally.
Well, you hit all the points when you said, interviewing all these entrepreneurs and all these business people, all the things that you saw in common. And you mentioned every one of those. That was me. Every one of those things you mentioned, that's like you saw the pattern, and you didn't miss anything, because that's pretty much, you've seen that over and over and over again. And when you mentioned them, I said, you got them.
Well, I'll maybe close it out then with something that you had mentioned just before we started recording, which is, sometimes the right thing to do is nothing. And sometimes you work really hard and it doesn't yield the result maybe that you thought it was going to. And how do you know when you're doing the right work?
Well, in retrospect, you usually know going backwards.
Sure.
At the time, you really don't know, because as I was mentioning to you, sometimes when I worked the hardest at some time, it had an adverse effect. Other times when I seemed to have worked so little, but maybe made a good decision or a lucky decision or met somebody that we did something with, it just seemed to work, and I almost felt guilty. Like it almost seemed like it was too easy.
Yeah.
And other times you work so hard and you didn't seem to get rewarded. It's not so easy when you're doing it, right? It really isn't. I think it comes back to, if you're passionate about what you're doing and you've had some success with what you're doing and you're pretty good at what you're doing, you'll tend to do it better. And if you do that, then you're competing with people who maybe are less passionate and not as good at something. So why not play to your strength? Why do you want to play someone else's game that you're not good at? you don't have success in it, you don't really know what you're doing, and they really like what they're doing, and they're really good at it doing, and now you're competing with them, why? You're starting off at a big disadvantage.
That's a good question.
Right? Now, at some point, you don't know anything about anything, so you got to learn something, right? But I got to tell you, when you use the concept of rational targeting, what you like, what you're good at, and what you're passionate about, then you're going to have exponential success because you're in your zone, and you would do it because you like to do it, and then you tend to do well with it because it's not even like work. It's just like what you do. And I think that makes things more enjoyable, and I think ultimately you probably have a little bit more success with it.
Yeah. Well, I think the second time around, it's probably hard to ask my traditional closing question because it's for your favorite hidden gems in Cleveland, and I don't know that yours have changed materially since the last time we spoke, but it was to some effect of just kind of the whole city overall as an underrated existence, from local charities to the Cleveland Clinic to the lakefront and the nature around us. But I guess the way I can reframe that question to be interesting a second time around is what do you wish more people appreciated or understood about Cleveland and its history, and maybe where you think its prospects are?
I think our real hidden gem in Northeast Ohio and Cleveland are our people. And I think we underestimate that on a relative basis, we have really nice people here that tend to get along relatively better than Washington or other parts of the world. And I think our diverse cultures and our diverse politics and our diverse nationalities and religions are a good thing. But I think we really underestimate our people. And we have a lot of people from Northeast Ohio that friends of mine we went to grade school with, and we finally said, you know what? Some of these guys can go anywhere in the world and compete with anybody. And we take our own people and the uniqueness, but also how authentic and how genuine they are for granted. So our biggest asset in Northeast Ohio is we have really a wonderful group of really good people. We lead the world in some areas in philanthropy, be it in the Catholic Church or in the Jewish community or in healthcare or in some of the arts areas, okay, or be it United Way and in so many areas. So it's the people. Yeah. That at the end of the day, that's our secret weapon and that's our secret sauce.
Awesome. Well, with that, I just want to thank you again for continuing the conversation.
All right, Jeffrey, thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas with you. I enjoyed it, and all my best to you.
Thank you. That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternfa, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.